Not looking up your nose. I'm gonna write this stuff on this board. So big exam topics for the Wednesday exam. And these are not necessarily in the order that they're gonna be on the exam, maybe in different order. But first big topic is what are the characteristics of acquired immunity? So the acquired or the specific or the adaptive. What makes that different from innate immunity? And in those three words are pretty interchangeable, talking about that third line of defense, that we get immune memory and it generates antibodies and it uses B and T cells. So that's one big topic, and kind of rolled up with that is the graph about primary versus secondary immune response. And I'll put up a version of that. So on this test, that's the graph that you draw and label and then answer questions about it. Find that graph. So basically this graph. And there's another version of it later in the slides. So we kind of had this version in the beginning of the slides, and then this version of it later. Those are talking about the same thing. It's probably more the first version that I want you to draw that doesn't separate it out into these two versions of antibodies. So the first version, know the axes, draw the shape. This one, there's not as many parts to label. So you've basically got, okay, there's the primary response and then there's the secondary response, but there's a few other important points to put on there, which are initial. So that's the first time the person's exposed to that specific antigen shape. And then at some point later, when they're exposed to it again, the secondary exposure.
It sounds like the black line was on the one with the other two.
Yeah, so the one with the two lines, I tried to draw like a combo line, which is kind of like this.
Just draw the line. That's
Yeah. This is a similar. So both versions of the graph, they're showing the same stuff. It's just that this one is calling it all antibody, all types of antibodies, and that other one had IgG and IgMs separated out. And for this class, that's a little bit, if you just know antibody level, generally, that's good.
Do you want us to describe the words?
Yeah, basically these words that are on here, you would need those as your labels. And then also the y-axis and the x-axis labels. So that'll be the A part, and then there's questions underneath to answer about that. And then you also can use this on the rest of the test to look at it. Remember stuff about it. So that's the graph of this test. That'll be helpful. Something else that will be on this test is a particular type of question that I like to use, which is a different style than we've seen in this class. So it's called T cells, B cells, both or neither. And what this is it's got a bunch of blanks and then a bunch of statements out next to it. So, for example, this is a real one that's on the test, but I don't mind to tell you one of it. So one of the statements is, this is a type of lymphocyte. And then I'll try to make up one that's not on the test. But this is one that's not on the test. Maybe, maybe in future years, I might. And so there's a list of statements, and then you put out next to it, does this describe T cells? Or B cells? Or both types, or neither of them? And there's about 8 or 10 of those. So a lot of the detailed stuff about a T cell, a B cell, how they're different, how they're the same, I use this type of way to test that. What about that first one? What'd you put for that first one? Type of lymphocyte. T cells are. B cells also. So one thing about this is if you put, this would be actually a both. And so if you put T cell, that's half right. If you put B cell, that's half right. It's really supposed to be both. So there's partial, this also has some partial credit opportunities in it. What about this one?
Big piece of.
What is peptide glycan? This is just something I pulled out of nowhere. Neither one. That peptide glycan is a bacterial wall. So I was trying to think of something like, what's something that neither one of these do? That'd be a neither. How about makes plasma cells? B cells. You can just write B for that. And I would phrase it more carefully to be something like, it divides and becomes a B cell. Or sorry, it divides and becomes a plasma cell or something like that. So that's how that section works. There will also be a big matching question to match diseases with description. And some of those are going to come from things we talked about today. Some of them might come out of the hypersensitivities part that we mentioned. And then there will be, I don't know what this question will be like, but there's probably going to be some kind of question about anaphylaxis in some way, because that's a big deal, and that's the most life-threatening of all, immediately life-threatening of all of these different diseases that we're going to talk about. So there's going to be some kind of question about anaphylaxis, and I don't know yet what it will be, but that's one of the big topics. Right, and I'll answer your question in a minute. Right now, this test is probably going to have some more multiple choice than usual, but it does not have, I don't know, I feel like in this class, every test has some kind of question that no other test has. It depends on the topic. But this one, it's not so much a figuring out kind of test, is more of a remembering type of test. So different people like different kinds of things better. Yeah, what were you gonna ask?
You give an example for them.
An example for number one? Write down the characteristics of the specific immune response. So it's slow, it's strong. You have to be exposed to the specific antigen, like a specific shape. It results in memory cells. It gives long-lasting immunity. It produces B cells and T cells and antibodies, stuff like that. Yeah, so that's a big written down list that you have somewhere in your notes. So that's for Wednesday. Wednesday, not Monday.
Matching. Of matching, is that as in part amount of questions or amount of points or?
It'll be a point apiece and probably 12 or 15. Yeah. I like those because it's quicker for me to write those than multiple choice. And when I was a student, I would have rather had that than individual multiple choice about diseases, because it's like, well, the answer's there, if I could just match it up.
Survey question?
Oh, that's okay. I don't know. I haven't looked this week to see if people answered the survey. There is, it says in there, if this many people answer the survey, everybody gets 3 points on the next exam or something like that. The last time I looked, which has been a while ago, because this week has been hectic, it was not enough people. So if one of the days, instead of a quiz, there was a survey and it's anonymous. But in a small class, I kind of need most people to answer it so that it stays anonymous. Yeah,
Was there a reading quiz like today?
we have not had reading quizzes
Okay, I was
lately,
gonna say that.
because I'm just kind of struggling. And I don't know if we may not have any more reading quizzes. We're probably not in this class. We're just probably not, because you all have a lot due. You got unknowns, you got parasite presentations, this test, so we're probably not gonna have reading quizzes. So this may have been like either the last reading quiz that existed or the next to last. And it wasn't a reading quiz, but it was like, go answer this survey. And if enough people answer the survey, everybody gets 3 points on this next test.
Presentation due this coming week? At the week
The
after.
15th. Yeah, presentations are the 15th. Yes, the 15th. Yes. It is crunch time in a lot of different classes. So all my classes, next week I'm giving 4 tests amongst my 3 classes. So everybody's got something. Cell biology has two tests. Bless their hearts. One of them's open note. Okay, so that's kind of the study list. And anything that we cover from today onward, it's going to appear either in the multiple choice or the big matching disease list. So we're past the pretty difficult stuff, and it's more of descriptive things now. Okay, so here we go. Did we finish the slide set that we were on last time? Okay, that is not surprising. Thank you for letting me know. I'll go back to it. See what was left. Oh, grafts. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so I decided for next year, I need to make hypersensitivities definitely a 2-day thing and put grafts at the end of it, and that will be how it'll be next year. So your OpenStax gives this like short review about grafts, and it's in a different section, but I wanted to put it here because graft rejection, when you give somebody an organ or a tissue that's not matched well, graft rejection tends to be a type 4 response. So, and this is not really about type 4 response. This is a picture that has definitions of types of grafts based on who's donating it. And I do like to teach these as vocab words. So you've got 4 vocabulary words here to describe if somebody gets a graft, where did it come from? And we call these isograft, autograft, allograft, and xenograft. And the easiest one, and the one that is going to definitely perfectly match you all the time, all your life, is autograft. So you donate a tissue to yourself. And you might think, when would you do that? Well, sometimes if people have a really bad burn and they need a skin graft, the surgeons will take skin off of their leg, like the, biggest part of your leg, and move it to your arm if your arm is burned. So that would be an example of an autograft, that you yourself are donating a tissue to put somewhere else in your body. This can also be done like for cosmetic surgery, to put fat in your face from other, usually comes from your butt. I think that's so fun. Anyway, that would be autograft. Isograft is the donor is your identical twin. So not everybody has that option. Not everybody has an identical twin, but if you do, they ought to have all the same self antigens that you do, basically. So that graft is likely to work, and you're not going to reject it, most likely. The most common type of grafts that we give people are allograft, where you're getting it from somebody who's not your twin, but you hope that this person needs to be tissue typed to be a good match to you. And a lot of times what they are matching is your particular MHC 1 and 2. So we've talked about these MHC 1 and 2 molecules that are like ID badges. They are not identical between people, and there's a lot of genetic variation amongst them. So what we're trying to match in those for tissue matching is the MHCs, or something called HLA antigens. Those actually mean the same thing. So if you ever need a transplant and it's determined that your family is either not a good match or they're not willing to give you one, usually they're not a good match, then you need to search for somebody that has a good matching tissue type organ for you, so that you don't reject it, or that you don't reject it soon. Eventually you will reject it. And then in your all's lifetime, there's probably going to be much greater use of xenograft, which is from an animal. So like, yeah, humans are animals, but xenografts from related mammals can be an option. And there have been some great advances in the last 2 years of engineering pig organs so that the people can have it and not reject it very fast. So there are a couple examples last year. Somebody was either brain dead or they were about to die anyway for a different reason, and they gave them a pig organ. So one was a kidney, one was a heart. You remember reading about the guy that got the pig heart? Whether that makes it into like social media stuff, you never know. But there was a guy that got a pig heart because he was about to die anyway. You might as well try the pig heart. And it kept him alive for a decent amount of time. It worked pretty well. But then the interesting thing was it came out that he was a criminal. Like he had committed a felony early in his life, and the family of the person that he attacked were very upset that he got the pig heart because he didn't deserve it. That's interesting, ethically. And he has now passed away, which he was going to anyway, because he was too sick to get a human heart, and he didn't make it on the human heart transplant list, but he made it a little bit longer with the pig heart. So when people reject organs, there are 2 different ways that this can go, and it can be called host versus graft. So when you see host versus, it's kind of like saying host attacks graft, And this cartoon is about that situation. So host versus graft, or host attacks graft. And when that happens, it's the host cytotoxic T cells that determine that this is foreign. Sometimes it's because the tissue has a slightly different version of MHC1 than the host. So these MHCs vary amongst people. But in the end, the hosts, or the recipient of the transplant, their T cells are going to attack the new organ. And in all cases of transplant, this is eventually going to happen. Unless it's an autograft from your own self, this will eventually happen. And we're at the point right now in medicine to try to slow it down. So if you give somebody a liver, we want the liver to last, 7 years, not 4 years. That's kind of the level that we're at. With the pig engineering organs, I feel like that's going to turn out to be more long-term in the end, because you can kind of do whatever you want to a pig, honestly, within ethical guidelines. And there's going to be a lot of advances there. So that's one type of organ rejection. The other one is graft versus host. You might think that's weird. So in this one, the donor attacks the recipient. And this can only happen when the donated tissue contains immune cells, which is basically you're giving someone blood or bone marrow. So if the donated tissue contains immune cells, those immune cells, those white blood cells that came out of the donor, can then attack the recipient. You're going to harm the recipient cells. And this one also, so for people that have leukemia, or they need a bone marrow transplant for, I don't know, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma or something that's a blood cancer. So they're going to get donated bone marrow with donated stem cells of someone else's blood cells to replace their immune system. And so this type of situation, if you know people that have had a bone marrow transplant, that is a whole other level of tissue matching. And they will not try it unless you've got a really, really good tissue match. So you all are young enough. I'm past it now. I'm too old. I'm too old to join the bone marrow donor list. Han was on it for a while. Like, he is very medically generous. He does stuff like that. Also because he's Asian, they don't have enough people of other races on these lists. But if you're so inclined to be medically generous, join bone marrow donor list. And it doesn't, you just spit in the tube, you mail it off, and they can determine who would you match. And then maybe someday if a kid or a person needs a bone marrow transplant and you're their perfect match, you could save their life. You're a generous thing to do. But what you want is for the donor's T cells to not attack the recipient's body. And for that to happen, you just really need a good tissue match for that. This is just a review. This is the same slide that we looked at before. It's just repeated again, and we're not going to actually review it right now. I'm going to go on to some new stuff. And this last slide set has quite a bit of, brief info about autoimmune disorders. And then some at the end about hyposensitivities, which are a separate thing, but together they're kind of one set of slides worth. Okay, so autoimmune disorders happen when a person's immune system attacks their own antigens. Your immune system is not tolerating your own self-antigens like it should be. So to understand why this happens, there's an important fact to know. So in childhood, our immune system is supposed to learn through some pretty complicated processes. We're supposed to learn what antigens are self. So we go through a process to learn what shapes are part of our own body and our own normal environment. And our immune system should learn to avoid attacking them. And this is called tolerance. That's called immune tolerance. So the reason that you don't attack your own shapes is that your immune system, up until you're about 8 years old, is kind of in a training mode to learn, oh, okay, that's actually a part of my own body, and we should not be attacking it. So we develop tolerance mostly when we're young, and then a little bit throughout life. Autoimmune disorders happen because we have lost tolerance in some way. We lose tolerance somehow. The how it happens, biologists and medical personnel are trying really intensely to figure out how it happens, but they're working slightly harder on just how to fix it. So sometimes you don't have to know everything about how something works to develop treatments. So there's a big push for treatments and a pretty strong push to figure out actually how does this happen so that we can help people with autoimmune disorders. So what's coming next is just, it's a list of the most common or most impactful autoimmune disorders. And I've tried to put, with each one, there is a picture. So this is going to be just really brief. And it's not going to teach you everything that you need to know about these diseases when you get into nursing school, but it's a preview. And then a reminder that this is the body attacking itself is causing this problem. So that's, we're gonna spend like, I don't know, 3 minutes per disease. It's kind of ridiculous, but type 1 diabetes, which used to be known as juvenile diabetes. This is the type that people get when they're quite young. Juvenile diabetes. And this results from immune attack on the insulin producing cells in the pancreas. So it's an immune attack on particular cells in the pancreas, and they are called beta cells. So Greek, capital B or beta, pancreatic beta cells. And this results in the child or the young person not being able to make insulin. And when they can't make insulin, they can't regulate their blood sugar. And then from that time onward, they will have to supplement insulin for as long as they live. I feel like for many years when I first came here, I always had at least one student that was type 1 diabetic. And lately I haven't, but what's maybe helpful for you all to learn or look at, early on is how would someone know if they have this? So they're always thirsty, and because they're always thirsty, they're also always urinating frequently. So that's an early warning sign in kids. Because insulin can't help move sugar from blood to cells, they can't get enough to eat. They feel like they're always hungry because their cells are starving, no matter how much sugar is in the blood. So be super hungry, very tired, cranky because of these three things. Tend to lose weight and blurry vision. So those are the warning signs that someone might have diabetes. And actually, these could also be for type 2 adult onset diabetes as well. So just one other thing, for those of you who haven't had AMP2 yet, people with diabetes can't move sugar from the blood into their body cells. So they would have high blood sugar, and their actual cells are starving for fuel. How many of you have a diabetic person in your family? Pretty common, mostly more of the type 2. Dr. Pickard actually has type 1, but it wasn't discovered until he was like 30 something. Unusual. He's very careful. He's very careful about what he eats. Next, this picture, I'm sorry. I started not to put this in. Graves' disease pictures is always just, Second disease that is autoimmune is one that can be called Graves' disease. And Graves' disease is immune attack on some hormone receptors in the thyroid. So this is a particular attack on particular cells that are hormone detectors in the thyroid. And one of the strange symptoms of Graves' disease is this exophthalmia, where your eyes kind of bulge out. Not everybody with bulgy looking eyes has Graves' disease. It's like, were their eyes not like that and then they were? That's what you're looking for as one of the symptoms. So this can cause maybe spelling this wrong, exophthalmia, which is bulging out eyes, and also goiter, which is an enlarged thyroid. People that have Graves' disease are going to have fast metabolism. They're going to lose weight. And they might have too high of a heart rate, and they might feel jittery. There's actually another type of autoimmune disease that can affect thyroid in the opposite way, and we might as well put that one on here too. The one that we're about to write is not going to be in the big matching list, but there are more people that have this version than Graves' disease. So there's another version called Hashimoto disease, where you have underactive thyroid. So Graves' disease results in overactive thyroid. These two are opposite of each other. Hashimoto disease is underactive thyroid with basically the opposite symptoms. So people gain weight, they feel cold, they feel sluggish, definitely not jittery, more like, oh, I can't peel myself off this couch right now. But what's interesting is people with Graves' disease or with Hashimoto disease can both have goiter. Both of this can cause enlarged thyroid. So anytime you see somebody that you know well and their thyroid region looks bigger than it was, that they should get that checked out at their next appointment. It's a sign. So that's why when you go to the doctor, they will feel your thyroid. See if it's enlarging for either reason. Okay, this one is a little bit different because the antigen being attacked is actually not part of the body. Celiac disease. What's the antigen? What's getting attacked in celiac disease? Gluten, yeah. So celiac disease is an immune attack on gluten. And then the side effects of the inflammation during that immune attack are going to damage the gut lining. You're going to see a good number of patients that have celiac disease because it's definitely increasing from what it used to be. And probably you didn't read OpenStax when you don't have a quiz, but they put in there this interesting statistic, or maybe I found this somewhere else, that when they actually test a large number of people in United Kingdom for how many people actually have celiac disease, blood markers, it's 1%. But not all of them know that they have it yet. That's a big number. And probably you know people that are either gluten intolerant or they have full-on celiac disease. But what foods have gluten? Bread, pasta, anything with wheat, barley, rye, those type of grains. You can eat potatoes, you can eat grits, corn grits. I have some friends that have gluten intolerance and celiac disease. So normal intestine should look like this in a macro view and like this in a close-up view and be able to absorb nutrients really well. So these yellow dots are showing this is the nutrients from your food. And in a normal small intestine, with a normal healthy gut lining, those are going to get absorbed. But in people with celiac disease that's uncontrolled, they don't have the right intestinal anatomy anymore to absorb nutrients. So they basically are going to get malnourished until the disease is under control. And currently, the best way to control celiac disease is just to not eat gluten, which is kind of difficult. And it's also very expensive. It's very expensive. So even these days, even normal bread is expensive. I haven't looked at gluten-free bread, but very expensive. And it's not really a great long-term solution to just be like, oh yeah, just don't eat gluten. Too many people, it's too, not a good way. So we need better treatments for celiac disease. Okay, the next one is, has some different names, so a lot of people will just call this lupus, Lupus, lupus. Its full name that explains actually what it does is systemic lupus erythematosus, which is quite the mouthful and quite difficult to spell. So it's systemic in that it's affecting the person's whole body. And erythematosis means red blood cell damage, basically. The lupus part, I don't remember what that is. It's just not actually coming from like medical terminology. It's coming from somewhere else. You might know what is being attacked in lupus. Okay, good. Because probably that means you don't have a family member with it. This is one of those biology facts that I was astonished when I learned this. The antigens that are getting attacked on this, this should say R. So they are blood vessel linings and DNA. You kidding me? DNA? Like DNA that every cell in your body has? Yes, basically. So those are all over the board. Those are everywhere. So people that have lupus, basically every place in their body they've got blood vessels, and DNA is at chance of getting attacked. So this is a very difficult autoimmune disorder to deal with. These are some of the signs of it. So they tend to have poor circulation and inflammation in any place where they've got capillary beds. So out in the extremities, it can affect their kidneys, muscle capillaries, and so on. But one of the things that can be special about lupus or noticeable about lupus is a person having a butterfly-shaped rash on their face. And that's what this picture is trying to show. It's kind of not showing up well on this screen. Yeah, it just looks like her whole face is red to me, but this particular pattern of rash can indicate lupus, but not everybody that has lupus has this, unfortunately. But if you see it show up suddenly, and it's in this pattern, and the person is struggling in other ways, you might say, you might want to get checked out for lupus.
Saying that a lot of kidney damage being sustained by this.
Yeah.
These people get transplants if their body is just gonna damage the.
The decisions about who can and can't get on a transplant list, like, I don't know that much about, but I know they take into account, like, if you get this transplant, how likely are you to live longer, and how likely is it that you would need another one in a certain amount of time? I'm gonna take pictures of the pictures. I'm probably gonna put them on Canvas. Yeah. Yeah, so who gets on the transplant list and not, it depends on the organ, and it depends on this whole questionnaire that they fill out, and it's a medical team decision. But I don't know. Like, I would think lupus would put you kind of low on the list. So. Did I tell you all my friend got a kidney transplant? That was back in the spring. Anybody that was in AMP2 last spring, and I was telling you, oh, my friend got a kidney transplant. She's doing really well. I think it was maybe just you two that was. Did I talk about that?
Sounds a little bit.
It was-
She worked here?
No, she was my friend growing up. And it was her child's caregiver turned out to be a good match. Gave her a kidney. Not only did she take care of the child for many years, like also gave the mom a kidney. That's so amazing. Anyway, she's doing well, my age. But she didn't have, I guess, she didn't have any other long-term issues, but she'll probably have to get another kidney eventually. Okay, another disease that you've probably heard of, but maybe didn't know is autoimmune, is rheumatoid arthritis, and this one's abbreviated RA, rheumatoid arthritis. So maybe, I bet all of you learned about this maybe in A&P1. Does Professor Red teach about types of arthritis? Like, it was a slide when I taught it. So there's 3 kinds of arthritis. There is normal wear and tear arthritis, because you just get old and your cartilage wears out. There is rheumatoid arthritis, which is immune attack, and then there's gout. Those are the 3 types of arthritis. So this type is you have immune attack on soluble self-antigens. And then you get immune complexes. So this is a type 3. This is a type 3 hypersensitivity, and it's also autoimmune. And the immune complexes lodge in joint tissues. And then you've got immune cells trying to clear them out, and they can't, but they do tissue damage as a side effect. So the joint tissue is damaged as a side effect of the immune response, or side effect of the inflammation that you get when these immune complexes lodge in your joints. Rheumatoid arthritis is different than some other kinds of arthritis in that it is bilateral. What does that mean? The disease is bilateral. It's going to affect both sides equally. So you won't see people with rheumatoid arthritis that have just one of their hands, their joints stiffly contracted like this. It's both equally. And that's one of the major differentiators when you see people with arthritis, like, is this osteoarthritis that your just joints are wearing out? Or is it rheumatoid arthritis? Gouty arthritis, you can check for that by blood test. And then, so you had asked last time about psoriatic arthritis, and I went and looked that up. And when we get to psoriasis, I want to mention, like, how is it different than this and what's known about it, which is made me feel better. It's kind of still not well understood. Yeah, rheumatoid arthritis is really painful, and it's really reduces people's ability to do things. Once your hands and wrists are in this state, like, you're not gonna be able to write, driving's gonna be iffy, cooking, very difficult. And the other places it can be is in the hips, hips and ankles and back, and through your spine as well. Was supposed to put a picture in here. Because I don't have a picture, I will put a picture in for Monday. Let's skip over this for right now. Go to this one. Myasthenia gravis. I used to skip over teaching this, but my friend's dad had it, and he probably didn't die from it, but it was a contributor. So this disease, need to review a little bit about muscle signaling. AMP1, are you to muscle signaling yet, and muscle contraction? Not yet in the lecture. Okay, so what's happening here is you have a nerve sending signals to a muscle cell to contract. And the reason I'm laughing right now is I just noticed they put like villus structure on the muscle cell, which is not a thing. The artist is not a biologist. Anyway, this is a muscle cell. And these signals are coming from a neuron to tell the muscle cell to contract. And to do that, they have to bind onto this receptor here. So there are receptor to receive the signal. And in myasthenia gravis, the receptor on the muscle cell is what's being bound by antibodies. So the self antigen that is bound by antibodies is a muscle cell receptor. So you have these antibodies that you're making and they're binding onto muscle cell receptor like that's something dangerous. No, it's not dangerous. It's part of your body. But you're making antibodies that bind onto it. And the antibodies block the signal. They block the signal and they end up paralyzing muscle. That's what myasthenia gravis is. So it's a paralyzing autoimmune disease. This tends to affect not all muscles equally. So it affects throat and facial muscles. I'll just put it commonly affects the throat and the facial muscles first. So my friend's dad that had this, he noticed that he had it because he has started having trouble swallowing and he would like choke when he tried to eat. He would choke when he tried to eat. And then they kind of noticed that his words were slurring a little bit because his throat muscles and the muscles to talk were most affected by this. And so he kind of went through periods of better and worse and better and worse. I think what he actually died from was pneumonia. So we went to the funeral and they're putting up pictures of him through the years. And his name is Jack. And so when I was in college, this friend was my best college friend. And we would go to her house and spend all this time. And I didn't realize it until I saw the pictures. But my friend Sarah said, yeah, what he hated the most about it was that he couldn't smile anymore. And then I realized, oh my gosh, yeah, I haven't seen him smile like in the last 8 years. So there was a certain point in the pictures where he's Jack smiling, and then he just looked kind of serious. And I hadn't really connected it. Like he literally could not smile. Thought he just felt bad about having my he was great. So this one is not as common, but it would present, or you would first see the symptoms of it, usually in swallowing, speaking, breathing difficulties, myasthenia gravis. It's an attack on muscle signal receptors. This is a good one. This is a good one to end on. Psoriasis. So this psoriasis, in some ways, if you're going to have an autoimmune disease, this one maybe is better than others because you can see it happening. It's kind of obvious what it is. A lot of autoimmune disorders are hard to diagnose, but psoriasis, the immune system is attacking or altering keratinocytes. And these are stem cells, basically stem cells of the skin that produce keratin proteins. And this is an interesting, this is a little different than other autoimmune diseases, is attacking keratinocytes in a way that make them work faster. So you get skin cells produced faster, or let's say too fast. And they have, they are improperly connected to each other. So you have disrupted skin layers, is how we're gonna describe this. And you've probably seen people with psoriasis. And it tends to have this kind of scaly white patchy appearance. And it tends, I don't know why this is, it tends to be up around people's ears and their neck, kind of on their hands and their forearms, which is unfortunate because those are very public places. So people that have psoriasis, it's not going to kill them, but it's just kind of embarrassing and it doesn't look nice. And they can tend to get more skin infections than other people. This one, it has been noticed that people that have psoriasis are more likely to get arthritis for an unknown reason. And they have named it psoriatic arthritis. And so we'll add this on, psoriatic arthritis can happen in some of these cases. So sometimes people with psoriasis can develop psoriatic arthritis. It is not bilateral. It comes and goes. So you may have psoriatic arthritis short term in a certain part of your body, not on the symmetrical side. So it's not bilateral. It is still a type 3 hypersensitivity, but they're still figuring out other things about it and how to figure out if a person actually has psoriatic arthritis. And now I don't remember what your original question actually was, but I remember like, I gotta look that up, psoriatic arthritis. Oh, she has it. Does she have psoriasis?
She just had like arthritis symptoms, they thought she had RA, and
Mhm.
her RA factor was, her
Mhm.
thing was negative, but
Yeah.
she had arthritic symptoms first, then that started.
Oh, then psoriasis.
Yeah, so it's back.
Hunter, what was your question?
So this could be like more.
These would either be in the matching or possibly multiple choice. Have a good weekend. If you're gonna do lab work on the weekend, like plan carefully. When do I need to come back? When do I need to start stuff? See you Monday.